Kuro just posted official news on the stats and effects of Shorekeeper's weapon. And wow, what do you know? It's the first limited support weapon in Wuthering Waves. With the lowest in-class base attack of 412 and a mind-blowing 77% energy regeneration, this weapon is unlike any limited 5-star we've seen thus far. With Shorekeeper taking on a supportive role across teams, it's natural that we're missing the typical crit stats that we're all accustomed to. The real spice, however, comes through its weapon effect, that, when activating various abilities in a wielder's kit, restores concerto energy while also buffing the attack of the entire team. That's a big damage buff, and a lot of concerto energy to smooth out rotations. It seems like an amazing support weapon, especially considering that it's a rectifier, but it's a bit more limited than you might think. Any player who's previewed these numbers and effects likely has a ton of questions. Is this weapon strong? Is it usable on multiple characters? And with Shorekeeper launching in just a few hours, is it actually worth pulling? Some of these questions have definitive answers, while others are dependent on your account and who you enjoy playing. The value of a limited weapon, especially in a game like Wuthering Waves, is tied to your roster of characters. With the ability to share weapons across teams and characters in the most important endgame content, one of the most efficient strategies a player can take when it comes to limited 5-stars is to pull for weapons that can be equipped across multiple characters on your account. When we think of characters that can share weapons, it's usually DPS characters who heavily benefit from the increased base attack and critical stats. However, Shorekeeper's weapon completely lacks those stats, so that number of eligible users drops dramatically. Today we'll be answering those questions you might be having on this weapon, breaking down the overall effectiveness of Shorekeeper's signature, who some of its best users will be, and whether or not it's actually worth pulling based on the state of your account. It's a powerful weapon, rest assured, but its overall value is highly dependent on how much you like Shorekeeper, and surprisingly enough, Baija, and how much you're willing to give up in future versions like 1.4. There's another pretty exciting character on the horizon. As always, if you're enjoying this content, please hit that like and subscribe button. Shorekeeper's weapon stat profile is easily the most unique we've seen in the game. With the lowest possible base attack out of all 5-star weapons and an absurdly high 77% energy regen, this weapon is not meant for any DPS characters. Instead, this weapon prioritizes resonators who want to constantly use their resonance liberations and in turn need a lot of energy regeneration. When Shorekeeper's resonance liberation provides some of the most massive buffs in the game, with her unique boosts to critical rate and damage, it's very important to have as much uptime as possible on this ability. Critical stats, particularly crit rate, can make or break a character's build by providing more predictability in their damage output, and maintaining uptime on this buff can allow you to spend less time or resources searching for those stats through substats on echoes. What this also means is that energy regen is one of Shorekeeper's most important stats. Shorekeeper won't be a character like Verena or Baija who can provide all of their possible damage buffs without using their resonance liberations. While those characters will simply have a longer rotation without using one, if this ability is not available at the start of your Shorekeeper's rotation, it'll have awful consequences for your team's overall DPS. Shorekeeper's weapon does a fantastic job at mitigating those worst case outcomes. It is her signature, after all. However, at the end of the day, base stats are only one part of a weapon's impact, regardless of how effective they can be. Oftentimes, the weapon's skill can be a main driving force for its effectiveness, and Shorekeeper has one of the most unique weapon skills we've seen thus far. This weapon grants a massive buff to HP, restores concerto energy upon casting a liberation, and buffs the entire party whenever the wielder uses a resonance skill that heals, increasing the attack from 14 to 28% for a whopping 30 seconds. This weapon skill tells us a few things. First, this weapon is meant for characters who scale off HP, heavily implying that this is the stat that Shorekeeper's healing and damaging abilities will work off of. Second, this weapon will have a fantastic role in shortening rotation times, which is one of the largest overall factors in a team's DPS. And third, one of the best parts of this weapon's effect, its attack buff, is also one of the most restrictive in the game. This is because the resonance skill used to activate this buff has to heal a member of the party on cast. This unfortunate condition makes this part of Shorekeeper's signature completely obsolete on one of the 3 healers in the game. Verena does not actually heal when she casts her Resonance skill. She heals when she activates her Forte circuit through heavy or mid-air attacks, or when she casts her Resonance Liberation. She cannot, at any point, even with sequence nodes, activate this attack buff. Verena also has attack scaling on virtually every component of her kit, making the terrible base attack and HP buff on Shorekeeper's signature very ineffective on her. What this ultimately means is that all this weapon provides to Verena is its baseline energy regen and the Concerto energy recovery on casting a Liberation. You'll see that Verena has much better options than this one. Baizha, on the other hand, has a lot more synergy with these bonuses. With HP scaling present across her entire kit, as well as a Resonance skill that actively heals the party, she's the only other sustainer in the game who can actually make use of every part of this weapon, from its unique base stats to its complete weapon effect. The weapon's use cases, being a rectifier, are also made worse by the fact that the other 3 rectifier users have absolutely no business at all ever equipping this weapon. They'll get better performance with virtually any other damage-oriented rectifier, even the 3-star ones. What this ultimately means is that Shorekeeper's signature, when used on any character that isn't Shorekeeper or Baizha, gives an HP bonus and Concerto energy on Resonance Liberation, and that's not very good. This becomes even more clear when we start comparing the bonuses on Shorekeeper's signature to other options. The main competition for this weapon is widely considered the best 4-star weapon in the game, Variation. Variation provides a very similar stat profile to Stellar Symphony with a similarly low base attack and energy regen substat. It also provides no additional stat boosts or team buffs in its effect, but makes up for that with the same exact Concerto energy generation as the limited 5-star weapon. The only thing is that it's a lot easier to activate Variation, as it's tied to a Resonance skill instead of Liberation. It's also a lot easier to get copies of Variation, as it's a 4-star weapon, and when a maxed out copy of Variation gives double the Concerto energy of Shorekeeper's signature, it's hard to make the argument to pull for Shorekeeper's signature, especially when there's a far more affordable option that can still be shared between party members. When you have to spend Astrite to pull for the limited weapon, that means you're not spending your Astrite on character banners. And when some of the 4-star characters like Sanhua, Mortefi, or Danjin provide a bigger attack buff than this entire limited weapon at their maxed out sequence node, you can easily say that pulling on character banners and accumulating these copies are a better use of your overall resources. Based off where this discussion is going, you might have a good idea on the potential value of Shorekeeper's signature. It's pretty simple. On one hand, if you have Variation and are happy with your team's overall damage output, there's no real need to pull for Shorekeeper's signature at all, especially if you have multiple copies of Variation. On the other hand, if you want to give Shorekeeper the biggest buffs possible with the highest possible uptime, the increased energy regen stat on Stellar Symphony will give you the best overall performance. On the third hand, if you really like Baizha, you can pull this weapon specifically to make her one of the better buffers in the game. But do keep in mind, it is completely unusable on virtually every other character. Hopefully this overview was helpful in highlighting the potential of Shorekeeper's signature. With all of the excitement surrounding the Black Shores and the filler patch that was 1.2, those Astrites are burning a hole in players' pockets. So be wise on where and how you spend. As always, if you enjoyed this content, please hit that like and subscribe button. Peace out.